Well, hello everyone. This is Barry Jones with Standards Plus History Academy. Website is sphistory.com. This is Monday morning, and we are beginning the final week of the JFK series, and then we'll transition into something a little bit slightly different. But as of today, we're looking at the JFK timeline, and we did Thursday and Friday, we did 61 and 62. Today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, we're looking at 63, and there's so much in 63, I've broken it into three parts. The question is the same as the other two prior. What are some of the key moments in 63? I've got several slides to go through here, just kind of casting a vision, a wide net of some of the events. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. I don't want to reteach everything I've already covered, so I'm sort of hitting the high points, emphasizing some of the things that we haven't discussed yet. Top left is the copy of the encyclical that Pope John Paul published in early 63. This is an important document because upon this, the publication of this document, two world leaders base their efforts at world peace going forward. One of them is Nikita Khrushchev, and the other is John F. Kennedy. Of course, John F. Kennedy is a Catholic, and his speech at American University, his famous peace speech, references this encyclical and sort of combines the religious with the political and making peace a moral crusade. And of course, Nikita Khrushchev reciprocates. And so when you have a world leader of the stature of the Pope issuing his encyclical calling for world peace, of course, religious leaders call for world peace all the time, but this is a singular moment because it just coincides with the two leaders of the two superpowers doing the same. And so it appears that everyone is on the same page. Top right is the famous event at the Orange Bowl we've referenced many times. JFK basically re-promising to the Cubans that he's going to continue efforts to oust Castro. But meanwhile, now this is the first time he knows that he's making a promise that he cannot keep, because at the same time, he's made a promise to Khrushchev to stop all activities in Cuba. So he's trying desperately to maintain the appearance of going after Castro, which is the purpose of this big event down there in the Orange Bowl, knowing full well he can't deliver on his promise. Bottom left is Fidel Castro meeting with James Donovan. Donovan was a negotiator sent on behalf of Kennedy and the government to negotiate the release of more Bay of Pigs prisoners. Donovan ends up becoming a prominent figure in the release of those Cuban brigade members. Bottom right, Alpha 66 and early 63. This is right on the heels of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we've promised to cease and desist in Cuba. Alpha 66 announces, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, early in 63 that they have carried out some operations in Cuba, attacked some Soviet ships, all trying to stoke the war they've always wanted, which is a war with Cuba, a war to overthrow Castro, and basically to countermand Kennedy's promises that he'd made to Nikita Khrushchev. This is going to have consequences, obviously, because Kennedy's going to be furious when he finds out what Alpha 66 is up to, and he's going to try to shut all this down, because he's got to preserve the promises that he's made to Khrushchev. Continuing on, this top left picture obviously is a nuclear blast. This is to signify the beginning of the back channel between Kennedy and Khrushchev to come up with a limited test ban treaty. Early in 63, the back channel has started in 61, continued in 63. 61, it helped negotiate the end of the Berlin crisis, the tank standoff. 62, it helped negotiate the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And 63, that back channel is going to help negotiate the limited test ban treaty. Top right is Kennedy giving that American University speech, the peace speech, to which a lot of the national security apparatus reacted very, they're just furious when they heard the text, the transcript, or they heard the speech itself and the things that Kennedy was saying. Bottom left, 63, the patsy is being maneuvered into place, and some of the sheep dipping that is taking place in early 63, continuing through the mid and late summer of 63, to paint the patsy as a pro-Castro sympathizer, a communist, a Marxist, all the things that are going to be necessary to make the cover story believable. So this is a picture of Lee Harvey Oswald's passport to the Soviet Union and Cuba. He gets this in 63. Bottom right is a picture of the Buddhist rebellion or the Buddhist crisis in Vietnam. This is as we get closer to actual war, and the Buddhists, which makes up the majority of the Vietnamese population in terms of religion, the Buddhist monk here is immolating himself, burning himself alive to protest the DM government, and U.S. supported that DM government. It's reported that when JFK sees this image, obviously he's horrified, but it nails down in his mind the fact that we can't get involved in this. This is an internal matter. We cannot get involved supporting DM when his own people hate him to such a degree that they'll burn themselves alive in the city streets. This is obviously a very dramatic representation of the Vietnamese hatred for their own leader. Continuing on again with the sheep dipping, top left, Lee Harvey Oswald passing out pro-Castro leaflets in New Orleans, along with several others there. Top right, JFK meeting with people in the Oval Office. And I put this picture in particularly so you could observe the man on the far right, a man named William Atwood. William Atwood is going to be significantly involved in a new back channel, not just the back channel between Kennedy and Khrushchev, but also now a new back channel with Kennedy and Castro. And Atwood's going to be a central player in that. Bottom right is the result of a coup that was authorized by Kennedy. One of the biggest mistakes he ever made, he admitted later, was authorizing the CIA to overthrow the DM brothers so we could replace the DM brothers with somebody more suitable that the Vietnamese people might support. And it was supposed to just be a coup, an overthrow of the government. They weren't supposed to kill the DM brothers. Of course they did. They assassinated, and this all happened on November 2nd, the day Kennedy was supposed to go to Chicago and he himself be assassinated there. So you can see what the deep state is thinking. On November 2, the two biggest obstacles to a Vietnam War, one is over in Vietnam, the DM brothers, because they don't have popular support, so we'll take them out. And the other obstacle is our own president here in America, who is by this point, he's already signed National Security Action Memo 263, authorizing the beginning of the pullout in Vietnam. So we'll take them both out on the same day, November 2, and then that way we'll get the war that we've always wanted. Bottom right is a picture of JFK meeting with his national security, actually the Joint Chiefs. Of course, you see John McNamara down there in the corner. This is the National Security Action Memo 263 signing, and basically the beginning of a new foreign policy for the United States when it comes to Vietnam. Top right is a picture of somebody that the CIA claims is Lee Harvey Oswald at the Cuban embassy and or the Soviet embassy in Mexico City 1 month before the assassination. They say he's meeting with a Russian specialist, an expert in assassinations, Kostikov, and he's getting his advice on how to carry out the assassination. A month later, he's also arranging for a post-assassination getaway to one of these two countries. Obviously, when you look at the picture, it's very clear that this is not Lee Harvey Oswald, though the man did sign in at the embassy as Lee Harvey Oswald, which tells you somebody is masquerading. There is a doppelganger. He's not even a good doppelganger. He doesn't look anything like Oswald, but this is who the CIA claims is Oswald in Mexico City a month before the assassination, preparing for his mission in Dallas. Top right is the news article of the article about Richard K. Nagel, and he's the double agent who was working for us, posing as a KGB agent, and as such had infiltrated the Alpha 66 plan to assassinate Kennedy and blame it on a patsy that they'd set up named Lee Harvey Oswald. And when he reported this to his Soviet overlords, they said, you've got to tell Oswald. We can't have a guy who's being sheep-dipped as a communist, someone who's been to Russia, someone who's being sheep-dipped as a Marxist, someone who wants to come back to the Soviet Union, someone who's meeting with a Russian specialist in assassinations, all these things. We can't have him blamed for the assassination. It could cause a war between the two countries because the inference is that we did it. So you got to tell him, if he doesn't believe you, you got to kill him. And so puts Richard K. Nagel in a terrible spot where he's either got to kill somebody, commit murder, or he's got to commit treason. And so his choices aren't very good. So instead, he goes into a bank down in El Paso, shoots up the bank, gets himself arrested, and ends up in jail. And he says, I'd rather be arrested and serving time in jail for burglary or attempted burglary than commit murder or treason. And of course, he is the reason why the Soviets know when the assassination happens that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it. He'd been set up because their agent told them so. They knew months in advance. They also know that this letter that arrives at their right there around the time of the assassination, accusing allegedly from Lee Harvey Oswald, this typed letter that makes it to the FBI, etc. They also know that that letter is a forgery, and it's all set up to make Oswald look guilty. And so they call the American people, the Americans' bluff. They call the FBI's bluff. The FBI was prepared to release that letter right after the assassination to show the American people how guilty Oswald was, that he was talking about in this letter having met with Kostakov and everything was in place. And it was sounding like this assassination plan was all rolling along quite smoothly. And then it happens, and then this letter is leaked, and it kind of drives the nail in the coffin of Lee Harvey Oswald and the Soviets. Well, the Soviets send this letter back to the FBI and say, we know that this is a forgery, and we know that this is made to make Oswald look guilty and to indict us in the process. And we were rejecting this letter, and as a matter of official protest, we're sending this letter back to you with the explanation that we know what this is. And it foiled the plan. You know, Richard K. Nagel was really important in the Soviet understanding of what happened in Dallas on November 22nd. He's also very important in foiling some of the attempt by the CIA and the FBI to frame Oswald, because some of it didn't work. It backfired because somebody was on the inside and knew how this setup was going. His name was Richard K. Nagel. So that's a really, according to Jim Garrison, Richard K. Nagel is actually the most important witness in the JFK assassination. You know, a lot of witnesses came out afterwards and said they saw this or they saw that. They knew this, they knew that. Hardly any of them came out in advance who had the credibility of a Richard K. Nagel. I mean, this guy was an established agent, a double agent. He was a star. And he came out and sacrificed himself so he didn't have to carry out his part of the plot, which was to either kill Oswald or tell him, commit murder or treason, and help the Soviets communicate to the Americans that they knew what was happening. They knew what was going on before it happened. Bottom right is the picture of JFK signing the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Bottom right is another one of the individuals involved in the back channel between JFK and Castro. His name is William Lechuga. This is on the Castro side of things. He's close to Castro. And so he becomes one of the guys that we negotiate with and through. Top left is a picture of JFK with another one on a back channel agents. His name is Pierre Salinger. He is a spokesperson for the Kennedy government. And so I wanted to introduce you to Pierre Salinger. Top right is the Texas School Book Depository as the patsy has been being maneuvered into place. As you can see, it overlooks Dealey Plaza. Bottom left is the inside of the 6th floor where Lee Harvey Oswald is stationed to work. And obviously, if you remember the motorcade route, it takes first a 90-degree turn onto Houston and then another 120-degree turn into Elm right in front of the Texas School Book Depository, the 6th floor window from which they're setting up Oswald to be the patsy. Bottom right is the picture of John McNamara meeting with Kennedy as the National Security Action Memo 263 has now been signed. Foreign policy has changed with regards to Vietnam. We are now in the process of pulling out of Vietnam. All right, so let's go through. We're going to go right up to October of 63. So our first date we want to look at today is March 19th, 1963. This is when the CIA-sponsored Cuban exile group Alpha 66 announces, so this wasn't a secret, they announced it, that they had raided a Soviet fortress and a ship in Cuba and killed 12 people. Now, the date here is important because it's not that long ago we were involved in a missile crisis with the Soviets, and we'd made promises to the Soviets. And Kennedy's #1 promise is that we would never invade or cause any problems in Cuba. So here we are, 3 or 4 months removed from that crisis, and Alpha 66 is killing people in Cuba and in our name, in JFK's name, in the United States name, and announcing it, taking credit for it. So this is, and this is a CIA-sponsored group. So this isn't just, they're not just acting on their own. Anything that Alpha 66 does is at the behest of the CIA, which is the American government. So this isn't some rogue terrorist organization. This is a sort of a remnant of Operation 40, which became Operation Mongoose. And it's supposed to make Kennedy look weak and ineffective, and having broken another promise to Khrushchev, stoke that, stir that pot again between us and the Soviets. That's the whole point of it. And if you doubt that, CIA advisor David Atlee Phillips says, quote, "The secret purpose of the attack in Cuban waters is to publicly embarrass Kennedy and force him to move against Castro." And of course, David Atlee Phillips is the #2 in the CIA. So anything he's doing is authorized by the #1, who is CIA Director Allen Dulles. So here you see what's going on. Kennedy has made a promise to Khrushchev. It successfully ended the Cuban Missile Crisis. And here a few months later, the CIA, having learned of that promise, decides, oh no, that's not how it's going to go in Cuba. And they start Lone Rangering it, using the Alpha 66 to go in there and try to reignite the tensions and the crisis, so that, well, if you wonder what it's about, just listen to David Atlee Phillips. He says he wants to force Kennedy to move against Castro. So they have not given up on that dream. And so that was March, what was it, 19th? Yeah. 12 days later, Kennedy orders a crackdown. He tells his brother, he says, we need to crack down on these Cuban refugee boats, all this CIA activity being run out of Miami. And so RFK and the Justice Department confines the movements of anti-Castro commando leaders to in other words, they get grounded. He says, you're not allowed to leave Miami, and which means you can't go to New Orleans, you can't go to Dallas, you can't go anywhere except Miami. You can't get the boats and go to Cuba. You are grounded to Miami. And he has the Coast Guard go down and seize their boats to keep them from going to Cuba and causing more problems. arrested their crews. This is the beginning of the end of Operation Mongoose. And this is Kennedy's effort to try to keep that promise that he made to Khrushchev. A couple weeks later, April 11th, is when Pope John issues his encyclical, Peace on Earth, calling for mutual trust and cooperation between, he says, ideological opponents. Of course, everybody knows what that means. That means the United States and the Soviet Union. This encyclical provides the foundation for the back channel to continue between Kennedy and Khrushchev, establishing the future parameters of a limited test ban treaty, a nuclear test ban treaty, which is a down payment on both their ultimate goal, which is nuclear disarmament. It also is the foundation for Kennedy's American University peace speech, which comes later. So this is an important development. James Douglas does some really good work on this in his book. I forget the name of his book all of a sudden, but probably the best book I've ever read, comprehensive book on the JFK assassination. And boy, he does some really good work tying in how important and how influential this encyclical was to both world leaders. And there was even some talk, some negotiations, some back channel, if you want to use that word again, between the Pope and his people and the Soviets and Khrushchev's people and Kennedy and his people. And they were all sort of working together and as like a little cabal to try to counteract the hardliners in both countries that are trying to push us to war. You got the Pope and Kennedy and Khrushchev trying to push us to peace. So you got these two opposing forces working at cross purposes with one another. The Pope has a lot of moral credibility with people around the world, obviously. It gives Kennedy and Khrushchev some cover. Notice the date on this, April 11th, 63, which is the exact same day that the encyclical that was published. JFK secretly writes Premier Khrushchev, stating that, quote, he is aware of the tensions unduly created by recent private attacks on your ships in Cuban waters, and we are taking action to halt these attacks, which are in violation of our law. This is Kennedy reopening the back channel and starting with basically a confession or an admission saying, hey, I know what happened. I know what Alpha 66 been up to. I know what the CIA's been up to. And I'm shutting it down. This wasn't anything I authorized. I know it's created some more tensions between our two governments. And I'm telling you, I'm assuring you that I am taking action to halt these attacks. And these attacks are in violation of our laws. This is when he actually starts making some arrests. If you remember, he arrested Frank Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt. These are CIA bigwigs that basically kept ignoring Kennedy. And so in order to prevent them from starting World War III, he has them arrested. He takes the boats, he seizes the crews, he takes all their weapons and ammunition and explosives and guns and everything. And same day, April 11th, 1963, James Donovan, who is the U.S. negotiator, returns to Cuba to confer with Castro for further release of Bay of Pigs prisoners. On the exact same day Donovan is going to talk with Castro about releasing prisoners, the CIA sends a gift. This is supposed to be a gift to Castro from Donovan and his entourage, but the CIA has contaminated this diving. Castro liked to dive. Castro was an avid swimmer, avid diver. And so this is supposed to be a gift of goodwill, but the CIA has contaminated the diving suit with poison. And the idea is to give this gift to Castro. He'll put it on, he'll go diving, and he'll die. It'll be a tool of assassination. And of course, then we could scapegoat Kennedy, because this gift, they'll figure out pretty quick how he died. It was this poisoned diving suit. that was given to him by JFK's negotiator, James Donovan. And so this will scapegoat Kennedy and sabotage this back channel that has started between the Kennedy government and the Castro government. So every step of the way, here you have the Cuban Missile Crisis negotiated to a peaceful resolution, no world war, thank God, everybody's off the brink. Meanwhile, the CIA is sending Alpha 66 out trying to restart it. And then on April 11th, Kennedy sends James Donovan over on a peace mission to talk with Castro about releasing more prisoners as a measure of goodwill, which is going to turn into a back channel between us and the Castro government. And they're sending a diving suit poisoned so that he'll die and restart tensions between us and Cuba. April 18th, a week later, Dr. Jose Miro Cardona, who was head of the CRC down in Miami, this is another one of these CIA front groups that's designed to try to sabotage. It was one of those Operation Mongoose groups. He's the head of this. He's been put in charge of this. He's a rebel leader, and he resigns in protest because he sees what's coming. Kennedy's shifting his Cuban policy. It doesn't matter what he says at the Orange Bowl. It doesn't matter. None of that matters because he has now closed down the bases. He's taken the boats. He's made it impossible. That he's grounded everybody in Miami, won't let anybody leave. He's taken all the weapons and ammunition. He's shut down JM Wave. He shut down the bases. And Cardona, in protest, furious, concludes that Kennedy's action proves that the struggle for Cuba is in the process of being liquidated by the U.S. government. So he resigns in protest. He's ticked. And so this is further evidence. Obviously, the CIA knows of the change in direction, which is why they have Alpha 66 doing what they have doing. This is why they sent a poisoned suit, because these are all groups. Alpha 66 and the CRC, these are CIA front groups. They are sponsored by the CIA. The CIA created these groups. They exist because the CIA funds these groups, supports these groups, trains these groups. So here you have these Cubans now aware, because the CIA has made them aware, that the guy they supported and the guy who had made promises to them has now betrayed them, who was the president of the United States. And he is shifting. The struggle for Cuba is in the process of being liquidated by JFK. And so this is where you start to see, I mean, these two groups have been merging. They have merged all along. They've been merged all along in an effort to overthrow Castro. But now they're going to be merged in a new endeavor. And that new endeavor is to take out the new obstacle, and the new obstacle is Kennedy. All right, we're finally out of April. We're into May 6, 1963. And remember now, last year in 62, Kennedy had ordered McNamara to order the general to come up with a plan to withdraw from Vietnam. And you remember when McNamara went to check in Hawaii, the general hadn't done any work on it. And so he had to reissue the order again. And so now they're back in Hawaii for another conference. And the Pacific Command, the general, finally presents McNamara with a plan to withdraw from Vietnam. But the plan is so elongated and the timeline is so overextended, McNamara rejects the plan. And he says, we need something that's going to happen sooner. I mean, you can see what the military is doing here. They're slow playing this and they're dragging their feet, bureaucratic resistance. And so McNamara is having to pull this general along, kicking and screaming. He defied the order the first time. Now the second time he gives him the plan, but the timeline is so ridiculously long, it'll never happen. And, you know, obviously what they're doing is they're playing for time. They figure if we stretch this out long enough, we can manufacture some sort of incident over there, and that'll happen in that interlude while we still have forces over there. We can respond to that incident. Next thing you know, we're at war. So it's bureaucratic resistance. So anyway, McNamara tells him, no, we need something to withdraw the first 1,000 by the end of 63 and all of them by 65. And so JFK authors National Security Action Memo 239, which orders the principal national security advisors to pursue two things simultaneously: a nuclear test ban treaty, which is the down payment, and a policy of general and complete disarmament. So you see what Kennedy's doing. He's got a lot of balls in the air. He's telling Khrushchev all this stuff in Cuba is going to end. I've put an end to that. I'm arresting these people. I'm taking care of these Alpha 66 and the Cuban Revolutionary Council and all these crazy Cubans and the CIA. Don't worry about Cuba. I've got that under control. Meanwhile, the back channel is continuing between him and Khrushchev for this limited test ban treaty. Meanwhile, he's got orders out to the military to come up with a plan to withdraw from Vietnam. He's got McNamara handling that. Then he authors National Security Action Memo 239 saying, okay, because he knows back channel, he knows the secret negotiations that's going on between him and Khrushchev and where it's going to lead. So now he's informing his national security advisors, okay, we're going to start putting together, and I need you guys to come up with a framework for a limited nuclear test ban treaty for the short term, and in the long term, a plan or a policy of general and complete disarmament. So it's no longer a secret. It's no longer just something that he and Khrushchev are talking about. He's now informing the powers that be, the national security apparatus around him. Of course, what that means is, as he informs his national security apparatus around him, that means the Joint Chiefs are now aware. That means the CIA is now aware. That means all these snakes that have constantly been working behind his back, trying to undercut everything he's doing for peace, now realize, oh, we see what he's up to. It's not just about keeping the equilibrium between us and the Soviets as things are. He's trying to disarm. He wants a test ban treaty and then eventually total disarmament. And of course, the CIA already knows he's beginning a back channel with Castro. So you can see this momentum, this peace effort of Kennedy's is picking up momentum. It's picking up speed. And, if these folks that are opposed to that don't do something quick, he might actually accomplish all this before he gets reelected. So they kick it into high gear. May 8th, 1963, there's a Buddhist protest against the Diem government in South Vietnam. There's these explosions that go off and they kill some people, wound some others. And the Vietnamese government accuses, which is our guys, remember, the Vietnamese government, the Diem brother, they're our people, right? And they immediately accuse the Viet Cong of setting off the explosion, which is the incident, right? That's the incident. So that justifies our people in Vietnam cracking down on the Viet Cong. This is like Remember the Maine. It got us into the Spanish-American War. We blow up our own ship. We blame it on the Spanish, and that becomes the rallying cry for us to go fight Spain in the Spanish-American War. Well, here, these explosions go off. We blame the Viet Cong, and just like we're going to do later with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, we're going to blame the Viet Cong, and that's going to launch us into the war. And the CIA is hoping that's what this will do. But an independent investigation later identifies that the bomber was a U.S. military officer, and the materials that made the bomb were CIA-supplied plastic explosives. In other words, we set it up. We did it. This Buddhist crisis threatens to topple the Diem government, which, by the way, by the time we get to May of 63, the Diem brothers have concluded, it's kind of interesting, we thought the Diem brothers were harming our efforts to get in. Our national security apparatus looked at the Diem brothers as problems because they didn't have the support of the Vietnamese people. And so our desire to get into the Vietnam War, in our view, the national security apparatus view, the Diem brothers were harming that objective. This is why eventually we're going to assassinate him. Well, the Diem brothers have made the opposite calculation, that U.S. support of their government is the reason they're so unpopular. So the Diem brothers are trying to talk Kennedy and our government into, exiting Vietnam. And the national security apparatus in the United States is trying to figure out a way to get rid of the Diem brothers so that we can go into Vietnam. So we got opposite things going on simultaneously. And this Buddhist crisis threatens everything. They're actually making progress between JFK and the Diem brothers. And you can see Kennedy's preparing to pull out. He's preparing to give the Diem brothers what they want. And the Diem brothers know where Kennedy's headed. So we're making steady progress to National Security Action Memo 263. But before that can happen, this Buddhist crisis blows up in everybody's face. And of course, now we know it was the CIA who did it. So it's another attempt at sabotage to get us more involved in Vietnam rather than less involved. So that happens on May 8th of 1963. We fast forward a month, June 10th, JFK gives the commencement address at American University. And he comes out specifically against a Pax Americana, a forced peace on the world by American weapons of war. That's not real peace. And that's what he's saying. That's not real peace when we use our weapons of war to enforce our vision of peace, our version of peace on the rest of the world. And Kennedy, in this speech, asks American people to re-examine their attitudes towards war, especially in relation to the Soviet Union. He said he really comes out. This is such an, when the president speaks, the words are really important. And they send signals all around the world. They send signals to your people here at home. They send signals to your enemies abroad. Everyone's parsing everything the president says. When the president comes out, instead of demonizing the Soviets, talking about them like they're an evil empire, like other presidents have done, he comes out and he says, he talks sympathetically about the Soviets and talks about how we had collaborated with them during the World War II, and that collaboration brought peace once, it can do it again. And then he talks about the Soviets and the sacrifice they made in World War II and how the sacrifice the Soviet people made was incomparable to anybody else. We didn't pay near the price the Soviets did. And he's painting the Soviets in a completely different light. And he's saying, you think World War II was bad? A nuclear war would be far worse. He says, quote, all we have built, all we have worked for would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. This folks, this would not be World War II version 2. This would be a completely different kind of war. And he announces in this speech his unilateral, this is him making an effort, a first step in the direction of peace. He's trying to send a signal to Khrushchev, listen, I'm going to do something here. Unilaterally, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to do it. This is the United States of America doing this. We're going to suspend further nuclear tests in the atmosphere so as to, quote, promote our primary long-range interest, general and complete disarmament. Oh boy, he's gone public now. The disarmament thing was something he held close to the vest for a long time. He always said from the beginning of his presidency, nuclear war was a red line. And he didn't want to be the president to authorize a nuclear war. Now he's taking it a step further. And he's saying, I want to completely disarm so that there is no possibility of a nuclear war. And at first he kept that idea to himself. Then he shares it with Khrushchev. Then he shares it with his national security advisors and the national security apparatus around. Now he's going public, telling the American people, telling the whole world. This is in June of 63. General and complete disarmament. So there's no mystery. Kennedy is not hiding anymore what his intentions are. Same month, June 25, 1963, Oswald is issued, the patsy is issued a U.S. passport in New Orleans 24 hours after his application and 1 year after his return. It's already befuddling that he was able to return from the Soviet Union without any complications, bringing with him a Russian wife and a child, and just reintegrate himself into American society with no repercussions for having already, threatened to give up his citizenship, threatened to give up nuclear arms, secrets from his days in the military when he had top secret security clearances, worked at the U-2 base. 6 months after he said that, Francis Gary Powers' U-2 plane went down, and yeah, he comes back and there's no repercussions at all. Now, one day after he applies for his passport, and a year after he gets back to Soviet, he applies for a new passport, and he lists the Soviet Union as his destination on the passport application. Now, we understand what this is now. Okay, this is clear what this is. This is sheep dipping. This is going to be part of the cover story. This is going to be part of the information that is dropped on the American people after the patsy is arrested and killed, showing that he fully intended to go back to the Soviet Union at some point, possibly after the assassination. This is his getaway plan, whatever. This is just part of the sheep dipping. Happened on June 25th. Same day, the nuclear test ban treaty takes another step. In Moscow, the U.S. negotiator Avril Harriman, pictured here with Nikita Khrushchev on the left, agrees with Soviet negotiators to a limited test ban treaty, which outlawed nuclear tests, quote, in the atmosphere, beyond its limits, including outer space or underwater, including territorial waters or high seas. So part of this has an environmental implication. And but the big deal is it's a step towards nuclear disarmament. So this is when it's announced. Now, if you know anything about the U.S. Constitution, you know that treaties must be ratified by the Senate. So just because the treaty is announced, outlining all the terms, et cetera, doesn't mean it's official yet in the United States. It has to pass through the Senate. So this is the beginning of that process. But as you can see, it makes big news, cover of Life magazine. Next day, June 26th, I think it was the next day, not June 25th. Yeah, next day, June 26th. Kennedy doesn't waste any time. He gets on national television and he says, all right, this is the beginning of the negotiation, the beginning of the Senate debate over this treaty, and he's making his case to the public. He goes right to the nation's population. He says, I need your help in getting, because at that point, if he had pulled the Senate, the treaty was dead on arrival. It wasn't going to pass the Senate. So what Kennedy's going to have to do, and this is probably, he lists this as his greatest achievement, because he is going to go on this crusade and engage the public in trying to put pressure on the senators to change their minds on this treaty and to support it. And he quotes Nikita Khrushchev in his speech that he gives to the American people, talking about nuclear war. They both hope to avoid. He says, quote, the survivors would envy the dead. And you can see every time JFK has a chance to speak publicly, he gives credit to the Soviets. He gives credit to his enemy, the Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviet people. He talks about their sacrifice in World War II. He talks about their collaboration with the U.S. in World War II and how it led to peace once, and it can do it again. And here he is quoting Nikita Khrushchev, giving credit to Khrushchev. And, Khrushchev hears this speech, recognizes those words, and he's like, oh, he's quoting me to the American people. August 9 and 10th, continuation of the sheep dipping of the patsy. Here you see the picture of Oswald passing out pro-Castro leaflets. This was, I mentioned this in an earlier episode about Oswald and how these folks that were with him, he would go down to the employment office and hire them, pay them per hour to come down and pass out these pro-Castro leaflets, these Fair Play for Cuba leaflets. And the whole purpose was to cause a public ruckus, to get the media from New Orleans to come take pictures, to film them, to put them on television. And he would actually tell these people who would ask him, how long do we have to stand down here in the street corner and pass out these leaflets? And he'd say, until the the picture till the cameras go leave. And as soon as the cameras would leave from the media, he'd send these people on their way, and the leafleting was over. This was all an effort to create a spectacle and to document it, to have newsreel photos, film, photos, things that would be dropped in the cover story later after the assassination that paint him as pro-Castro. He's already got the Soviet passport, you know, and this is part of that effort to paint him as a Marxist, as a communist. And later, when it becomes convenient to do so, that's going to be the story, the cover story that's dropped on the media and the American people, saying that this guy killed the president. He's a communist. He's a Castro lover. And he actually gets arrested on these 2 days for passing out leaflets, and then having a confrontation with one of the anti-Castro Cubans who Oswald had met recently and volunteered to help his organization. The next time he sees him, he's handing out pro-Castro leaflets, and they get in this fake little fight on the city streets. Oswald gets arrested. He spends the night in jail, during which he meets with a New Orleans FBI agent, John Quigley. Quigley later destroys those notes from that meeting. So anything that was discussed, we don't know what was discussed, because he destroyed. There's a pattern of that, by the way. Every time he meets with the FBI, they destroy their notes. You remember the meeting in Dallas? He meets with Hosty a week before the assassination, delivers a letter. That letter gets destroyed. The notes here from this meeting get destroyed. We now know FBI, thanks to the works of some pretty ambitious researchers, that Oswald was an FBI informant. So meeting with these FBI agents was not out of the ordinary. He was doing it on a regular basis. There was an FBI informant named Lee, for instance, who warned of the Chicago plot, foiled that whole Chicago plot. So this is not anything out of the ordinary. He met with FBI all the time. He was an informant for the FBI. This is one of the deals that he made with Bobby to get readmittance to the country, to be an FBI informant, telling the FBI, telling the Justice Department, telling Bobby what the CIA was up to. Of course, he would know because he was in the CIA as well. So interesting that the notes were destroyed. You know, this little street theater where he gets arrested has a dual purpose. One is to discredit the Fair Play for Cuba committee and make them look like, you know, they're trying to subvert U.S. foreign policy, and obviously, if one of their members later is accused of assassinating the president, that's going to discredit the whole movement, right? So by him being the one passing out the Fair Play for Cuba committee leaflets, and then a couple months later gets accused of assassinating the president, any organization he was a part of is going to be discredited completely. So that's part of the effort here. Another part of the effort is to paint him as a pro-Castro assassin, and or at least pro-Castro, who was capable of an assassination. So that's August 9 through 10. August 24, we have advisors, presidential advisors, Rogers Hillman, Avril Harriman, and Michael Forrestal, drafting a telegram to the newly appointed Saigon, which is Vietnam, ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge. This is where Kennedy, you know, he regrets this later, but he makes a decision to support a CIA-led coup against the Diem brothers. And the argument is that if we can get them out and replace them with this is something that he got talked into by the CIA and by the national security apparatus. And what they're saying is they're so unpopular. You saw that monk burning himself alive in the city street. They're so unpopular that for us to stay and continue to be involved in Vietnam, we have to replace them, to get somebody in there that the Vietnamese people will support, because then by extension, they'll support our involvement. And Kennedy gets talked into this. He shouldn't have done it. He shouldn't have done it. It turns into an assassination. Remember, the Diem brothers were actually on his side secretly trying to get the U.S. extricated from Vietnam because they blame the U.S. for their lack of popularity. The fact that the U.S. was there, they said, well, the Vietnamese people don't like us because they don't like that the U.S. is supporting us. And they're tired of these colonizing powers coming in, pushing their weight around. They didn't want France here. They certainly don't want the United States here. And so the Diem brothers are trying to get us out. Kennedy's trying to get us out. So you would think he would hang on to the Diem brothers. They're partners secretly with what he's trying to accomplish. But he gets talked into this overthrow, this coup. JFK endorses this telegram that his advisors are going to send to the Henry Cabot Lodge. And of course, this creates a paper trail that they're going to use against Kennedy and say, hey, well, Kennedy authorized this whole thing. This was something Kennedy was in support of. And so what happens is the coup turns into an assassination of both Diem brothers, and total disaster. And Kennedy was wrong. He shouldn't have supported that. And he admitted such later. September 12th, 1963, in a National Security Council meeting, the Joint Chiefs resurrect the Doomsday Plan. He's already stormed out of one meeting in 61 over this. And now here they are again presenting a report where they've actually gone through and, I guess they had actuaries run the numbers and what it would look like if we preemptively struck the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons between the years 64 and 68. JFK's listening to this and concludes, quote, preemption is not possible for us. It's a non-starter. And he doesn't even comment on the report's implication. What the report said was the best time for us to do this is before 1963 ticks over to 1964. The remaining months of 1963. In other words, these guys are in a hurry. They want to do it now. This is already September. So they say, October, November, December, we got 3 months to strike the Soviets. In other words, when in 61, when they presented this plan and he storms out of the meeting, remember, it was all about preemptively striking the Soviets before the end of 63. So instead of quitting on the plan and disregarding it, because they can see clearly Kennedy is never going to support it, they continue the plan. They continue running the numbers and figuring out all the logistics, et cetera, et cetera. And now that they're ready, they come to him, I guess, for the green light. And they're saying, hey, if in case you've reconsidered, and maybe they're thinking, well, he just authorized this coup in Vietnam. Maybe we got to strike while the iron is hot. And so they go and they talk to him about this nuclear first strike. Of course, Kennedy's like, it's a non-starter. I'm not even considering it. A week later, he gives that famous speech to the United Nations, expressing the hope that the Limited Test Ban Treaty can begin the process, launching us in a new direction of a just and lasting peace. And in a meeting with his UN ambassador, Adlai Stevenson, he approves William Atwood contacting Castro's guy, Dr. Carlos Lechuga, to open a secret dialogue with Premier Castro. Kennedy is on a roll. He's already back channeling with Khrushchev. He's got this nuclear test ban treaty that they worked out secretly, and now they're negotiating in the Senate, debating in the Senate. He's going to the American people. He's went public with his ultimate goal of just nuclear disarmament. He's rebuffed the National Security Council, Joint Chiefs, and their nuclear strike. Now, everywhere you look, Kennedy is steamrolling towards peace. And he already has the example of the back channel between him and Khrushchev, which he's going to use as leverage with Khrushchev's lackey, right? Castro. And he's going to say, hey, if we can work out a deal, me and Khrushchev, certainly me and you can make out a deal between the United States and Cuba. All right. So that's September, got the date there, 20th, same day is when Richard Case Nagel went into that bank, which you see there a picture on the bottom, and shot it up and got arrested for attempted burglary. And turns out this guy is a counterintelligence agent who's been playing both sides. He's a double agent. And he tells the FBI, I'd rather be arrested than commit murder and treason. And I told you the story. And real quick, I just review. He had infiltrated the plot of Alpha 66 to kill Kennedy and to set up Oswald to be the patsy. And so he told obviously he's not going to tell the CIA that, because the CIA is the Alpha 66. So he's infiltrated. He knows that plot. But he's telling his Soviet overlords, he's giving them information, tells them that story, and they're like, you got to tell Oswald. And if he doesn't believe, you got to kill him. And of course, he didn't want to kill Oswald. That's murder. And he didn't want to commit treason by doing what the Soviets, he's a counterintelligence agent for us. So if he does something for the Soviets against us, that's treason. So he's between a rock and a hard place. So he goes into this bank, shoots it up, and instead of being out there being forced to do things that he didn't want to do, he's sitting in a jail cell, and he's got a clean conscience. He told Oswald, he said, listen, and Oswald was a friend of his. He told Oswald, and Oswald just didn't believe him. But he's done his part. And now, instead of participating in the plot, he's sitting in a jail cell. So he has the ultimate alibi. But this is September 20th. You think this is a case, this is a moment where the assassination that was in the works for Dallas, or possibly for Miami or Tampa or all the places leading up to Dallas, the plot might be exposed at this point. That was his point. That was his objective. He was trying to forewarn the powers that be of what was to come to prevent it from happening. It just didn't work because it was all covered up. 3 days later, September 23, 1963, the back channel begins between Kennedy and Castro. There's a party, and it's arranged by TV newscaster Lisa Howard. And you see her pictured. She had a relationship with Castro. Many people think that she was having an affair with Castro so she could get close to him. And it was supposed to be the party was covered, but it was an opportunity for Atwood, JFK's guy, to meet with Carlos Lechuga, who is Castro's guy. And they're going to talk about logistics, how this is going to work. Atwood tells Lechuga, I'm fixing to go to the White House. I'm going to ask permission from the president to meet secretly with Castro. Would there be a way for me to meet face-to-face with Castro? Is there any possibility of rapprochement between Havana and Washington? Is there possibility of peace between us? Is this worth our hassle? And Lechuga expresses great interest, which means Castro is interested, which means this back channel is going to go forward. September 24th, Atwood does meet with Bobby, and who tells Atwood, all right, keep meeting with Lechuga, but it would be great if you could meet directly with Castro instead of Lechuga, maybe take it to the next level, but we'd like it to be in a different location, somewhere other than Cuba. It's a little bit too risky to go to Cuba, not necessarily for his personal safety. That wasn't the question. It was exposure. And Kennedy's trying to keep this as secret as possible for as long as possible, like he did with Khrushchev. So if Atwood goes to Cuba, somebody would figure out what's going on. September 24th, 1963, same day, the Senate approves the Limited Test Ban Treaty by a vote of 80-19. You can do a whole episode on that treaty and how they turned around a deficit, which when it was first announced in June, and people started gauging the votes of the 100 senators and how it would go, it was clear that they were losing, that it was not going to pass. But in the interim, the only thing that's changed is that Kennedy's gone public with it, and he's gone around and speeched and speeched and speeched. Everybody in front of everybody, all these different crowds, trying to get people to the public interest to support it and to put pressure on these senators to change their votes. And he was so successful. This goes to the persuasive powers of the presidency, specifically of a guy like Kennedy, who could convince the American people to support something that the senators originally were against. This is when you talk to anybody who's closely associated with Kennedy at that time, they all said the same thing. This is, in his view, his greatest accomplishment. So the limited test ban treaty is ratified on September 25th. September 27th, his other peace venture in Cuba continues. Atwood meets Lechuga in the UN in New York City in the delegates lounge, telling him or giving him a message that he is authorized to meet Castro, but they can't meet in Cuba. And so Lechuga says, I'll take the message back to Castro and we'll see if we can work out an alternate location. Same day, September 27th, 1963, according to the CIA, there's a man who they say is Lee Harvey Oswald. Of course, he's signing in at these embassies as Lee Harvey Oswald. And this is the pictures that they present from video cameras saying that this is Oswald. Of course, it's obvious it's not. And this guy is applying for immediate travel visas to both communist countries. He has several altercations with employees or people in both agencies. He says some things that are incredibly incriminating. He creates scenes. It's all this sheep dipping to publicly document this journey of this assassin. This guy's going to be accused of assassinating the president, doing all these incredibly suspicious things, and they always involve Cuba or the Soviet Union and things of that nature. September 28th, the next day, according to the CIA, the same man who identified himself both times as Lee Harvey Oswald returns to Mexico City Soviet embassy, asking for a quick visa to the Soviet Union. He'd been rejected the day before, so he goes back and asks again, and becomes agitated when they said, we got to fill out all these forms. He takes a revolver out of his pocket, places it on the table, and obviously that's pretty suspicious behavior, and says, I have to carry this for my own protection. They again escort him to the door. This is the second time. And later, after the assassination, or right as the assassination happens, the CIA releases information saying that they have incriminating phone calls by somebody named Oswald that they had wiretapped and transcribed, in which the speaker, Oswald, associated himself with Kostikov, the Soviet assassination expert who worked at the embassy. And when the FBI listened to the recordings, they could tell that the phone caller spoke broken Russian, which Oswald did not. Oswald was an expert. He was a fluent speaker of Russian. So that was a clue that this wasn't really Oswald. And then when they listened to the voice, they could tell they had already interrogated Oswald. This is after the assassination. They had already interrogated him, and to a man of 6 agents who had experience with Oswald and listened to his voice, they all said that's not his voice. So the speaker was speaking in broken Russian, which Oswald spoke in fluent Russian, and his voice was not Oswald's voice. And so they told the CIA, they informed the CIA, this is not Oswald. So immediately the audio tapes disappear, and all they have left are the transcriptions. The CIA got rid of the audio evidence because it didn't fool anybody, and later got rid of the video evidence because it didn't fool anybody either. This whole thing was a concoction. It was a setup. The Mexico City thing was all a setup. Here is Pierre Salinger. This is September 30th, 1963. JFK reopens a secret channel of communication between himself and Khrushchev. This is going forward, Kennedy no longer trusted his own State Department. He no longer trusted the national security apparatus around him. And, you can see why. We've gone through example after example, situation after situation where they've leaked or they've sabotaged or they've tried to undercut his policy. And so he doesn't trust, and he is accomplishing more with these back channels than he is through them anyway. And it takes forever to go through the official channels. And he's accomplishing things pretty quickly through these back channels. You think about the beginning, if you go back to the back channel first one, when it started in 61, he was able to negotiate with Khrushchev an end to the Berlin crisis that had real tangible results. And it was just him and Khrushchev. And in 62, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, him and Khrushchev. And now in 63, it was the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Again, him and Khrushchev. And if you're the national security apparatus or the State Department, this is your job. This is what you do. And the president's looped you out of it. You're no longer in the loop because he don't trust you. And for good reason. And he's getting things done quickly. He's got this back channel on the side going right now with Cuba. So there's no reason to believe if Kennedy doesn't die on November 22nd, there's no reason. At the moment that Kennedy was killed, there were people there in Havana, meeting with Castro on behalf of JFK. At the very moment, there's no reason to believe he wouldn't have peacefully resolved our issues with Cuba and with Castro. Probably before his reelection in 64. It would have happened that quick. That's the track record. Everything was happening quickly. And so here he is reopening through Pierre Salinger now, this back channel with Khrushchev, because remember now, the Limited Test Ban Treaty was just a down payment. What he really wants is complete disarmament, nuclear disarmament. And so that's the next step. So Pierre Salinger's job is to help him achieve that. So that's where they're going with that back channel going forward, a complete nuclear disarmament. October 11th, 1963, JFK issues National Security Action Memo 263, making official government policy the withdrawal from Vietnam of 1,000 U.S. military personnel by the end of 63, and by the end of 65, everybody. This is the result. Started in 61 when he ordered, or actually 62, when he ordered the general to come up with a plan. And remember, the general refused, and McNamara had to reissue the order. And then he gives a plan that's so ridiculously long in its timetable that McNamara rejects it and speeds it up, says it all has to happen by the end of 63 and 64 or 65. And so now we have that. And that gives Kennedy, now that he's worked his way through the channels and he's got the military doing their part, and he's ready to go public and declare his intentions to pull out of Vietnam. To a degree, the public part is the first 1,000. You see how he's doing this? He's stair-stepping all of this. The nuclear limited test ban treaty was limited with a goal of total nuclear disarmament by the time he's done with his presidency. The withdrawal from Vietnam is National Security Action Memo 263 says the first 1,000 by 63. And then with the goal being by the end of 65, everybody. I got to get reelected first. So Kennedy is placing, everywhere you look, he's putting down payments on what's to come. A down payment on nuclear disarmament, a down payment on no Vietnam War. October 11th, 1963. 5 days later, the patsy is reassigned from, he spent the whole summer in New Orleans. Now he's reassigned. He does go to Mexico City. Okay, him going to Mexico City was for a different purpose. The subterfuge the CIA came up with, that he's meeting with all these Soviets and Cubans and Kostakov to plan an assassination. That was their cover for the real reason he was there. If you want to know the real reason he was there, I covered that in earlier episodes about the Medical Manhattan Project. Now, after that, he's reassigned to Dallas, and his new handler in Dallas, Ruth Payne, gets him this job in the Texas School Book Depository, which I've circled that sixth floor window there. As you can see, look at that vantage point and how incriminating that is. If you're the patsy and being set up to take the fall for this, that's a pretty good location, right? Overlooking the kill zone. And it's why it was so convincing. You know, this cover story that's prepared in advance, they left nothing to chance. This job, remember who owned this building, by the way? This was the Dry Holes Bird, the LBJ guy, one of the oil guys. This was his building. And of course, it was an LBJ guy, his assassin, Mac Wallace, whose fingerprint was found in that sniper's nest up there in that sixth floor window. But Oswald worked in that building on the sixth floor. And so this was going to be the guy they're setting up, just like they did in Chicago. They had Thomas Arthur Valley working in that building, the lithium plate building, right in front of a 90-degree turn, just like they did in Miami, where they had or Tampa, I think it was Tampa, they had the Floridian Hotel, where Lopez was going to be the patsy. They always put their patsies in these buildings, tall, high-rise buildings overlooking the motorcade in front of 90-degree turns. So here's Oswald, downtown Dallas, and everything is being set up quickly because Kennedy's moving quickly. And so that's the events of, I think we started in March of 63 up to October of 63. And we've got 2 more days of 63. So there's a lot of events that are going to happen in and around the assassination itself and the immediate aftermath. So that's the first installment of 1963, episode 101. Check out my website, sphistory.com. Don't be a stranger. If you're listening and you got something to add, feel free to comment. I enjoy reading those comments and responding to them. Also, hit the notification bell and give me a thumbs up if you feel that it deserves it. Feel if I deserve it. And then also feel free to subscribe to my channel. It's free. Thank you. Until tomorrow, we'll see you. Everybody have a great day.